Full Bloom is brought to you in part by the following. Welcome to Full Bloom, the award-winning show that celebrates life. Here's your host, Zita Christian.
Hi everyone, welcome to Full Bloom. I'm Zita Christian. Tonight we're going to talk about what I think is a fascinating topic. It's called an NDE, and that stands for Near-Death Experience. I have two guests with me tonight. Each one has experienced an NDE. We're going to talk to them about what it is and how the experience changed their lives. Please join me in welcoming my two guests. First, Walt Dembiczak, who is co-coordinator, correct, Walt, of the Near-Death Experience group.
Yes.
And Sarah Murray. Thank you both for being here tonight. And I know from our previous conversations, you've both had a near-death experience. But before we get into that, Walt, I want to ask you some basic questions for people in the audience who might know nothing at all about this. This might be the first time they're even hearing about the topic, this whole thing of NDE. What is an NDE?
Well, it's a period of time that when you leave your body, some people call it the soul. Your soul leaves the body, or your spirit leaves the body, and it goes to another dimension.
All right, and because I know you've had more than one, but let me ask you, thinking back to the first time, did you know what a near-death experience was before you actually had the experience?
No, I did not.
And Sarah, what about you? Had you ever heard of an NDE before you had the experience?
I had heard of an NDE many years before I had my experience, and had sort of not thought of it for quite a long time. I had read about it in a book, but I had not actually thought about it for quite a while.
Well, let's stay with you right now then, and tell me about the experience that you had.
My experience was related to a very severe car accident in which I did clinically expire, so to speak, and I did obviously survive the car accident and had several experiences of, as Walt has described, being aware that I was out of my body, that my soul was out of my body, and I was looking down onto my body and kind of wondering what all the commotion was, because this was after the car accident and I had been taken by helicopter to a hospital trauma unit, and I had this experience, and it was very phenomenal, and I would just say that it wasn't expected, it wasn't planned, they never are, and today I really do see it as a gift.
All right, I want to go back to the experience first and set the stage a little more. Was it daytime, nighttime?
It was daytime. It was in the morning. I was on the way to work. I was actually on I-95 in Connecticut.
Were you driving?
Yep, I was driving, and
was this what time of year?
It was in November of 2005.
Okay.
And it was actually a very pretty day. I do remember that. I don't remember the accident itself, but I remember the day. And I remember I had done my usual morning routine and gone on to work. And at the time of the accident, according to witnesses, I tried very desperately to try to get control of the car.
What happened?
And I had a blowout tire.
Oh.
And I was in an SUV that I think probably now they have corrected some of these safety deficiencies in this particular car, but at the time this car had these safety defects, so I couldn't get the car under control, and I was eventually unable to stay in the car. The velocity of the rollover, which it went into, was so intense. There was actually thrown out of the car through the driver's side window. Seat belt just popped open.
Wow.
And my body went, according to the police report, a good 33 feet in the air and then went down on the other side of the highway on my head. And so that my experience later, when coming out of a coma, I began to recollect that something had happened to me, that I had had an experience. And like a lot of people who have near-death experiences where you're for really in the time that we respect here on the earth, that is really a couple of minutes. But I had no sense of any time. I was just simply having this experience of what I guess one would call the spiritual essence of me that I have now come to believe does go on, even though the body might no longer function, that there is some essence in all of us that goes on. And my experience was to go into a tunnel, which was huge. It was very wide. And there were loving beings around, most of them relatives and friends, and even animals like horses, dogs, cats, and stuff that I had had as a child growing up in Virginia. And they had passed on, you know, and they were there, and they were kind of welcoming me. And then there was light, a beautiful, warm light, and a sense of being completely loved. And then over in a slight distance was this curved bridge, like in Monet's Impressionistic paintings, the very dreamy bridges with the flowers, and there's a little body of water, which I understand is quite common in near-death experiences, because water and bridges can be a flowing through or going over. And I never actually went over the bridge in this experience, but I did see my mother on the other side. My mother had passed a few years prior to this experience, and it was interesting because even though she herself, of course, is not in any physical form really anymore, but there she was, and she was in an apron that she used to wear all the time. She appeared so I guess I would know her. And I don't know how that happens. I guess that's just the power of love and your mother's love, you know. And she appeared in the apron. She had white hair. And then next to her was my father, who had died many, many years prior to my mother. He appeared very young, handsome. I found that interesting because I always say women don't want to deal with age. My mother appeared older, but she said to me, "Honey, you need to go back. It's not your time."
Oh.
And I said, "But it's really nice here." And then my father spoke, and he said, "You need to listen to your mother. Your mother's right." And so what I've heard from so many people who've had these experiences is that what they got a sense of, and I also got a sense of, was the eternal power of love. Because these are my parents, and no matter what happened in my growing up, we all loved each other dearly, you know, and that love was so powerful that somehow I got to see them. I think I needed to see them. And I was at one point prior to going through the tunnel, and I think I mentioned this, looking down at people feverishly attending to this woman who was actually me.
Were you on the road then, or were you in the hospital?
At that time, I was in the hospital. There was a body there being worked on with many, many medical people, and it was actually a trauma unit. I later found out, but I was kind of looking down, wondering who she was. I didn't recognize myself. I've heard others who've had near-death experiences where there's an accident or something of that sort say that they also kind of didn't get who that person was that was struggling, and what was that about, and why are they helping this person, what happened.
Could you see?
You didn't have that connection.
But could you see your face when you looked down and you're looking at the
body?
body?
I can't say that I saw the face, no, in detail, but because I was pretty messed up. I actually have had a lot of surgeries since this car accident, but I didn't really have any concerns. I didn't feel pain. I probably was being very protected and saved from all of that. And then when the time came to return. First of all, my mother told me you need to go back, and she said it sort of like, you really need to do this, and you need to listen to your mother kind of voice, you know?
Yes.
But also, and I love my mother, continue to love my mother very dearly, and a great deal of respect for her, you know, so I listened. But then there's another experience before I actually returned to my body where some being of light was there. Wasn't really like an angel. It was some holy being of some sort, divine being, very wise, very loving, and asked me if I wanted to go on to the other side of the bridge. And I said, no, I think I have to go back.
Because your mother said so.
Because my mother said so.
That's it.
But I also said, you know, this is a really nice place. I really would love to stay here. But I had my children. I had my life. I needed to get back. I could sense that it wasn't done for me yet in my earthly life, and I needed to return, you know. So that was the primary near-death experience. I did have clinical deaths a couple of other times. That's my most profound remembrance of the near-death experience.
Then when you went after that experience with the being with the light,
yes,
do you remember actually like a re-entry into the body? And
yes,
if you did,
I do.
Did you then feel whatever pain the body was experiencing?
Well, what was interesting was, yes, I remember almost feeling poured back in to my body. And I was in and out of consciousness when that occurred. I remember not quite understanding what my legs were. What are they for? What is this? I didn't know what had happened. The medical staff was really wonderful. They were very gentle. They gradually started telling me I had been in an accident, but they did it intermittently, you know, because I wasn't quite aware of everything. And therefore, in their wisdom, they were very compassionate with me. And when they told me, and I really started to understand I'd been in a car accident, I wasn't afraid. And I had overheard in the coma a couple of doctors saying, this was right after the accident, probably the first night, and I know that my children later told me this was true, that they had said that I might not make it through the night, and that they had brought a chaplain in the hospital to speak to my children.
How old were your children?
My kids were teenagers, 2 children, son John and daughter Mimi, and so I remember hearing, and when you're in a coma, you still have your hearing. And I remember a doctor saying to another physician that he was concerned I might not survive the night. And he didn't say it in any mean way. He didn't, you know, he just said it. And I did hear it. And I remember thinking, no, guys, you know, I remember thinking, no, I've been told I'm going to make it. You know, don't worry, it's all right. I wanted to comfort them, but I couldn't talk.
Yeah.
At that time, I was in a coma and I was fully intubated, you know. But later on, I did bring this up with the physician who said it because I recognized his voice later, and I asked him, I said, hey, doctor, you know, were you the guy who said I might kick the bucket? And he said, oh, it might have been me. And I said, well, obviously you were wrong. And he said, Sarah, I'm very glad I was wrong. You know, and I was too, because I knew it wasn't my time. I had been told that, and I understood that, and I was ready to come back and live life and heal and get over the accident and go on and do what I needed to do for the rest of my time here.
All right, now I'm going to come back to you in a minute because I want to find out more about how that experience has changed your life. But before we do that, Walt, tell me about, I know you've had several near-death experiences. Tell me about one of those, because while yours was not as profound or as traumatic, I guess, as Sarah's, yours was nevertheless, as you described or as you defined in the beginning, when the essence, the spirit, leaves the body. So tell me about one of your experiences.
Okay. My third experience was that I met my guardian. I left my body. I was being given a Reiki healing session. I left my body, and I met my guardian angel in this very large meadow, and it was dark. Yet I could see her.
Now let me back up just a minute.
Okay.
I know from our previous conversations that this was the third experience you had, and in the earlier experiences,
Right.
you had been, maybe, I guess introduced might be the right word, introduced to this being that appeared in female form, and that you are referring to as a guide, a guardian angel.
Yes.
And this was this entity, this energy, spirit, that you met now when you were having the Reiki treatment.
Right.
Okay, I didn't mean to interrupt. I just want to be sure to get the information. So
Yes.
tell us what happened.
My guardian angel lifted me up, and we went, the best I can explain it, we went soaring. And there were no stars in the sky. It was very black. The sky was black. Yet the higher we went, the stars, tiny stars started to appear. They started to twinkle. And then the higher we went, they twinkled even more. And over to the right, there was a large cloud bank. And it was lit, a light coming from inside. And my guardian angel took me over to it, and she said, "Would you like to go inside?" And I said, "Sure." So I just drifted inside into the center of this cloud bank and into the center of this very intense light.
So you too had an intense experience with light.
Yes, it was very loving light. That's all. I don't try to explain it anymore, or I don't say I can't explain it. I just going to tell you, it's a very loving light, and I was just suspended, and I rotated slowly. And I was just engulfed in this very pleasant, loving light.
And at any point in this experience, did you have a choice to come back?
Yeah.
You did
Yes.
too?
After, in fact, the intensity of being in this light was so great that I was beginning to get anxious, and so I left the cloud, and my guardian angel took me, and I explained to my guardian angel how intense the light was, and it made me a little anxious. And she said, "Well, that's understandable." And she took me back to the meadow, and she said, "Okay, yeah, you can go back now." I said, "Yeah, but I really like it here. I really like it here. I want to stay." And she said, "It's not your time."
So you heard a voice also. So in both cases, there's something,
Yeah,
there's
but
an audio experience.
but not by lips.
Oh, so it's more
It's
a
like
sense?
like mental telepathy or something.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in your case, it wasn't a matter of facing a physical threat like Sarah's was in a car accident, but you were in a deep state of relaxation because of the Reiki treatment.
Yeah.
So Walt, let me stay with you for a minute. I want to find out from each of you how the experience, if the experience changed your life, and if so, how. But first, let me just let those in the viewing audience know, in case you're just joining us now, we're talking about NDE, near-death experience. And the two people with me tonight each has experienced a near-death experience, and for both of them, more than one time. Walt Dembiczak and Sarah Murray are talking with us about that. And Walt, let me go back to you now and ask you, how did the experience change your life, if it did?
Well, I feel when I asked my spirit guide about staying, and my spirit guide said no, it's my guardian angel told me no, it's not your time. I said, well, then what do I have? What am I supposed to do when I get back?
Interesting.
And she said, you'll know.
So there was that sense of having a mission, of something that you still needed to do.
Yeah, apparently I haven't finished what I came came into this lifetime to finish.
But Walt, see, I find that interesting because I found out about you through an email listing that I get, and it was because you are co-chair of a group of people who meet on a regular basis at the Farmington Medical Center, correct?
Yes.
To talk about having near-death experiences. So I look at that and I say, oh, well, yeah, I know exactly what you were still meant to do. You were meant to bring people together and create a comfortable environment where they could talk about this. I want to ask you about that just for a minute.
Sure.
Can anybody come to the group? And first, when does the group meet?
Well, we meet the second Monday of every month, 12 months a year.
Second evening?
It's in the evening from 7 to 9 p.m.
And this is at the Farmington Medical Center?
Right, at UConn Medical Center.
At UConn, okay.
Right, the UConn Training Hospital, I guess it is. As best as I know, the persons that started this group worked there as a psychiatrist or psychologist or something.
Okay.
There are two of them. And the person that coined the term near-death experience later said he was sorry he coined it a near-death experience because you don't have to be near death or dead to have this experience of crossing over to the other side.
Interesting. I didn't realize that. So people come, I'm assuming, because they want to talk about it with, I'm guessing here because I haven't been, but I would think that if well, actually I have had, based on this, how you're defining things tonight, yes, I have. And I would love the opportunity to talk with someone else who had experienced that and someone who would not look at me and think, oh, you're just a little too weird. So everybody here is either they've had the experience or they're curious about it? I mean, do people come who have not had the experience?
Yes, it's about 50-50.
Okay.
But sometimes it's a person whose relative has had a NDE and maybe is passed on. And they come on to get more information. And I think it's a safe place for people to talk about it.
That's important.
Yeah.
Sarah, I want to come back to you now and ask, did this profound near-death experience that you had, did it change your life, and in what way?
I think, yes, it did change my life, and I think the most profoundly noticeable way is my forgiveness of all things, my forgiveness of myself, others, situations, getting a clarity, knowing that I don't want to live not forgiving, living with any resentments. It taught me to bring love into everything that I do. And I am not afraid. I don't have fear anymore. That's been an interesting piece for me.
What were you afraid of before?
Lots of stuff. Driving a car, for one thing. But no, I mean, just the fears that people have, the fear I won't have enough money, or the fear that somebody I love will die, or the fear that I'll get sick, or, something will happen to one of my children. Fears. Innumerable fears. And today I have such a trust of a very loving power in the universe that I believe and others believe probably saved my life, because the medical piece of this hasn't really been able to explain how come I survived this accident. So there must be something, a power, a higher power working, I think, for all of us, So.
Well, when you talk about higher power, let me ask, when this happened to you, would you have defined yourself as a religious person or a spiritual person, and has any of that changed after the experience?
I grew up with a particular religious background down south. My mother, who was very influential, was not afraid of death. I would say more at the time of the accident, I might have just begun more of a spiritual journey than being affiliated with any particular institutionalized religion, although everything I've learned from having this near-death experience, everything has its beauty and its purpose,
Yes.
including all religions. And therefore, I absolutely would not say anything about a religion in any detrimental way. There's a place for everything, and everything has its meaning. So for me, it is to live with love, to live with forgiveness, to live viewing what is most important, which is life. And all these other things that used to be so important to me, no,
So
they're
it's
not.
true when they say that when something really traumatic happens, your priorities get put in
You
order.
do. Going from an experience of trauma can bring one to a place of grace, and I think an understanding of the beauty of life.
Sarah, that's a beautiful statement. And Walt, let me ask you, at the time that you had your first experience, would you have considered yourself, would you have defined yourself as a religious person, a spiritual person, and has any of that changed because of this?
I grew up in a strict religious home, and I questioned, but I couldn't question it out loud, why things were why things were so because I was told. I couldn't contradict my parents' thinking about my religious upbringing. But at the time of my first NDE, I was at a very negative part of my life. This was 1990, and I really stopped thinking and considering any religious background, any spiritual upbringing that I had. I just tried to forget about it. I was a very negative part of my life. 10 years later, when I had after my third NDE, and I realized that these really changed my life, and I really feel that there's something else after this life, that there is something after this life, that my negative thinking went away. Best way I can explain it is this. One of our members, who's not here tonight, said, we have one purpose in our life. She had a very profound NDE also. Our primary purpose in this life is to love and be loved.
That's a beautiful primary purpose, and what a nice way to close the show. So I am getting the signal we're out of time. So Walt Dembiczak, I want to thank you very much for being with us tonight. Sarah Murray, thank you very much for being with us. Thank you both, too, for sharing the stories, very deeply personal stories, and I appreciate your sharing them because I'm sure that there's someone in the audience who is listening now and thinking, I've had an experience similar to that and I'd like to find out more. You can always contact me. I'll be happy to put you in touch with Walt and the NDE group out at the Yukon Medical Center. Let me also thank my FB crew tonight, and finally a thank you to you in the viewing audience. I say this every week and I mean it sincerely. I do know the value of time. And thank you once again for sharing an evening with me. We'll see you next week. Thank you.
Full Bloom is brought to you in part by the following: